Hi everyone! I am super excited to be back for this month's book review video. This month we'll be discussing two amazing classics, painters, that is, born in the same year, Velazquez and Van Dyck. There you go. I'm super excited to show you these two artists. They're great artists and these are two solid books, so let's go ahead and get into them. Okay, so we are going to get started with this book on Velazquez, and I should start out by saying that this book isn't actually mine. First book I'm sharing that isn't technically mine. This is my boyfriend's book, and we obviously share books, but yeah, first one I'm showing that isn't mine. But anyways, it's a really good book. I like it. I was surprised when I was doing research on it to share with you guys that the reviews on Amazon were not particularly positive, but that being said, I still liked it. You're going to notice in this book there are a lot of close-ups. It's not a typical exhibition catalog book where they kind of have just like the set plates and the set essays. It's more intermixed than that, and you'll see random close-ups. The one thing about this book, I'm not sure how accurate the colors are. If you want to be really picky about that kind of a thing, I feel like most of the close-ups are good. I think some are going to be more scans to be showing like the paint layers and stuff, whatever they do these for. And those obviously are not, they don't appear good quality, but they're not really supposed to. So probably important, I feel like that's important to know when you're going in for this book. But otherwise I feel like it's really good. Velazquez is of course amazing, and this has been a really great reference if you wanted to get any nice close-ups of Velazquez's work and learn a little bit more about his technique. I haven't read this book, but from what I was researching on it, I don't believe it goes in particular detail on how he was actually painting. It's maybe more of a scientific look at his technique. Now I can't say that for sure, but that's what I gathered. It was less about how he actually painted and maybe more of a scientific approach to examining the paint. And sorry if you can hear my heater turning on. It's very cold today, given the bright red hands. Anyways, we'll keep going. But Velazquez is actually very interesting, and I read up a bit in the descriptions, but he was a court painter to King Philip IV of Spain, and he ended up he was a primary court painter, so many of his paintings relate to that. More research I'd done on him was saying how, his actual signed works that we know for sure he signed and did and all, or as sure as you can be whenever you're looking at paintings, from the past, number fewer than 150. So a lot of his work we know comes from copies that his assistants did after his work, and assistants, apprentices, that kind of thing, rather than by his own hand. But, truly just a masterful painter. He was heavily influenced by Titian and later on Rubens, after he supposedly met Rubens in Spain. And that's kind of an interesting tie that these two artists have that I'll be sharing today. Both were influenced by Rubens and appeared to have known him during their lifetime, which makes sense given that they were born in the same year, 1599, I believe. So yeah, I just love these close-ups. It's really nice. I unfortunately have not seen a ton of his work in person, so I really can't vouch for the color quality. But as far as just a book of close-ups, I feel like they're really decent and very accurate. So really great. But yeah, Titian's just remarkable. He did a lot. Interesting tidbit about his portrait of Juan de Pareja, which I don't know if it's in this book or not, but I don't actually believe it is. But Juan de Pareja was, there's some conflicting information on whether he was actually Velazquez's slave or assistant. There's kind of hard to tell based on, the historical records not being as reliable at times. But Juan de Pareja himself was actually an amazing painter, And I love looking at the difference between Velazquez's painting of him, it's hanging in the Met, versus Juan de Prey's self-portrait that he did, which is just, oh, I gotta be honest, Juan de Prey's portrait, as much as I love Velazquez, his self-portrait, it's just really fascinating because it, you know, feels like a much more honest depiction of Juan de Prey. So really, really great painter himself, and obviously he worked under Velazquez in some capacity. But yeah, very excellent book on Velazquez. So this is one I've been wanting to share with you guys for a while because it's just a great book. And fun fact, it was actually, if I'm remembering correctly, it was on the reading list for the Florence Academy of Art US location. I'm not sure if they're the same through all campuses. I only went to the US one, and it's unfortunately now closed, but I remember thinking, oh yay, Luke already has this book, so I get to see it. It's really cool. Yeah, so we're nearing the end of this book, so as you can see, it's definitely not maybe your traditional monograph, but I really recommend it if you're a fan of Velazquez and you want to kind of get a different perspective on his work. It's really good. So there we are. Alright, now we're going to check out this book on Anthony Van Dyck. This is a good book on Anthony Van Dyck, mostly because it's kind of more comprehensive. So it's Van Dyck paintings and drawings, which is always nice when you can kind of get a book that represents both. So very interesting painter. He obviously was a contemporary of Velazquez and Rubens. Technically, the Rubens was older than the other two painters, and he was heavily inspired, like Velazquez, by Titian in his earlier years, and I mean throughout his life, but kind of it's one of the inspirations that is most notable. And he also, like Velazquez, at some point met Rubens. It's a little bit unclear from what I was reading about whether or not he was a student of Rubens or he just worked with Rubens or was an assistant, that kind of a thing. But most art historians say that they do believe the inspiration of Rubens on Van Dyck is pretty clear in his work, and I second that because every time I'm in a museum and I am in a room full of Rubens and Van Dycks, I can always tell the Rubens, but sometimes the Van Dycks, I'm like, is that Rubens, Van Dyck? I can't quite tell. So that's just from my limited knowledge of these two painters. So anyways, they're very interesting. One interesting thing I read while researching for this video was that they said he painted similarly to Rubens, but in his earlier years he painted more thickly and more direct, whereas later on he ended up painting more economically in layers and glazes. The implication seemed to be that it was to save paint and, you know, be a little bit more smart about it, but I'm not positive. So, very interesting guy, great painter, and this book, to talk a little bit about it as well, I haven't read it, but it seems to be a very straightforward art historical kind of reference. But I do appreciate the inclusion of his drawings and some watercolors even, or some ink sketches, whatever you want to go by. And the one thing I will say is the print quality isn't maybe always amazing. Part of that has to do with the texture of the book, which I know seems silly to bring up, but the page quality really does make a difference in the print quality. So it's just something to point out. If you have a book, this is obviously very thick, stiff paper, and it's matte but reflective, and it's a little bit, just watch for that whenever you're able to look at books in person, because it will impact the quality of the book. So this book actually ends pretty soon because there's all these notes in the back. So yeah, so that's this book, but glad I could share it with you guys. It is a good one if you are looking for a reference on Van Dyck. I hope you enjoyed this month's book review video. Stay tuned for next month's, where we are going to feature at least one still life artist, maybe two, depending on what books I haven't shown you guys yet. But as always, let me know if you have any suggestions, and just see you next month.